Hey guys, this is Bluffmunkey for Sonic Academy, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at, if I don't drop it, the BeatStep Pro. So this is a hardware sequencer that allows you to take control over your hardware synths and drum machines. Think about it as a kind of cut down version of Ableton Live, very cut down, but what you lose you gain in hands-on control and interactivity. And one of the things I've been trying to get away from with all this nonsense that I'm fond of buying is getting away from this mouth breathing, you know, the door pose. You sit there for hours on end, click, click, click. And this, using something like this just allows me to develop some kind of muscle memory for the creative process of music making, if that makes sense. So it's not just about pointing your mouse and clicking, although there's vast benefits of using a computer that I would never go back to using hardware. I'd never go back to using tape. But I feel that some of the process of creating the music in the first place is a little bit lost with software, despite the bonuses and benefits you get from using software. So we're going to take a look at the connectivity. We're going to take a look at the controls and how you might integrate it with your studio. So let's get it hooked up and get started. Hey guys, well, here we are, here it is. And all I've done at the moment is I've connected the BeatStep to the computer with a USB cable. This is USB powered, so let's switch it on. Ah, lights, flashing lights, that's what I love to see. So I'm just gonna have a quick overview of the front panel. I find dust. Quick overview of the front panel, and then we'll have a quick look at the software. I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as possible so we can start actually doing stuff with it. So there is a chance I'll be repeating some of this information as we go as well. So first thing we come to is a sync button. This allows us to choose how the BeatStep is synced. So we've got an internal clock. It can be synced via USB. So you could have this as a slave to Ableton Live, meaning that when you hit play on Ableton Live, this plays as well. You can also have it synced to the MIDI socket or to an external clock, which would be CV. We're probably not going to get into CV in these videos. I know that Sonic Academy will be doing a separate video on CV, but we're going to focus on the basics and just stick with MIDI for now. So we'll keep this to internal. Next is your tempo. You can either adjust the tempo with a knob here, or you can do a tap tempo, and it'll work like that as well. One other thing you can do, just get it onto, see, 140 BPM. Come on. If you hold down shift, you can do incrementals as well. So that'll be 140.25 BPM. Although I don't think anybody does that anymore, do they? That was really to match vinyl, I think. Then we've got our swing, random and probability functions, which we will look at later. Our roller and looper, which we will look at later as well. These are some of the more functional controls to add and remove steps, set up your MIDI channels, where or how many steps you want, and then we've got transpose link and a preset link as well. And then we've got our transport controls. So we've got a shift button which has quite a lot of functionality all over the sequencer. Record, stop, play and pause as well. So these are all fairly self-explanatory. Now coming up to the kind of the meat and potatoes of the machine itself. At the top here we've got control mode. Now what this allows us to do is use the pads and the knobs to control external devices. So you can either have that set to MIDI CC, so you could use this to control an external synth via CC, MIDI CC, or you could also have this set up for the MCU/HUI, which is the Mackie control surface. This can work as a control surface for your DAW as well. This isn't something I do personally, because I've got lots of other separate controllers for that, and I've got a push as well, but you can do it if you want. But it also allows you to, if you hold down project, you've got 16 savable projects. And you can see the number changing there. So you can choose those fairly quickly, and obviously you can save those from this screen as well. Now each of the projects has got 16 individual sets of step sequences inside per sequencer. So project 1, you can have 16 separate sequences saved in sequencer 1, sequencer 2 and sequencer 3. So speaking of which, coming down we've got 3 separate sequencer channels. 2 are dedicated to more of a chromatic scale. So these are really designed to sequence external synthesizers, and then at the bottom we've got a dedicated drum channel as well. And again, we're going to look at all of these in a bit. Although you can set up the drum channel chromatically as well, so you can use the drum channel to control synthesizers as well if you want. We won't be doing that in this video though. So let's go up to the screen here. It's already hooked up, the device is already hooked up to the software. If you're familiar with the Arturia software, it's actually fairly intuitive. You can choose which device you want to control. At the moment I've only got my BeatStep Pro connected. And from here you can sync the device with your software. You can load and save projects. You can load and save MIDI data. All the options to do that are down here. Save, new, import, export, etc. Let's come over to the project tab. So a lot of the controls on this machine itself are mirrored inside the software too. So you've got your swing, tempo, random and probability functions. This isn't something I tend to use for this because I prefer it to be more hands-on. But one thing that is quite useful is the ability to use a piano roll style sequence. If you want to do something a little bit more complicated and you really want to get the sequences into the BeatStep quickly so that you can then do live performances, I do find this quite useful because you can use it. You know, if I double click on here, I can put notes in, I can extend notes. And it's a much quicker way of getting sequences in if you just want to start your performance. Now I have done a couple of, let's continue. I have done a couple of sequences I was using for something. So for example, I wanted a sequence that was 4 sets of 16 steps long. We'll look at how you do that with the hardware itself later. But this is fiddly to do on the hardware itself. So this is 4 long notes. And all I've done is I've put the notes into the software here, and then you just store it to, use this store to button, store it to the device. And it's going to do this slowly. If you have a look at the bottom here, it's sending the data to the BeatStep now. So I'm going to fast forward this bit. Okay, so that was sent to sequencer 1. Now if I press sequencer 1, you can actually see the whole thing's lit up now. So what this means is that I've now got 4 notes. Now if I use these page buttons here, I can scroll between the 4 sets of 16 steps. And if I hold down one of the knobs, these are touch sensitive, you can see that each note on each step, so this is C1, G0, G sharp 0 and F0, they correspond to the notes I put in the software. So it's a much quicker way of getting fiddly to input notes into the machine. But for now we don't need that, so I'm going to shift 1, which is clear pattern. So you've got all of the standard controls here as well. Everything that you can do on the unit you can do here. So you've got your swing, randomness, probability, triplets, timing, scales. But again, these are things I'll do mostly on the hardware. And then you can do that over 16 individual patterns. Okay, so you've got 16 patterns which are mirrored here. And these can be controlled with these left and right arrows. So you can flick between patterns here. Let's clear that again. Or you can hold down the sequencer button and flick between patterns there as well. So that's a faster way of doing it. Then coming over to the drum rack, pretty much the same functionality. If you imagine Ableton drum rack, you can start placing your drum sequences in here. But I find the drum sequences much easier to do actually on the machine itself. So let's just clear those, get rid of those. And again, the same functionality, timing, playback directions, etc. And then finally, we've got, in this section at least, the controller map. So while we're here, we're going to have a quick look at the connectivity. It's much easier to see on the screen here. So we've got the USB connection, which you can see here. That supplies power and sends data. On/off button. Then we've got MIDI in, out. These come on little mini jacks. You've got kind of a dongle to connect it to proper MIDI cables. But we'll have a look at those. I'm going to hook one of those up. Then we've got an old-fashioned audio clock in and out. This comes on DIN. You get dongles for these as well. These are DIN sync, so you can clock external devices. And then we've got drum gates. These are old-fashioned audio click drum gates. So you can use these to trigger an external drum machine. Although you can use MIDI as well. I will be using MIDI. And then you've got 2 sets of standard CV. So you've got pitch, velocity, and gate. And they're color matched to the sequencer panels itself. So you know which ones are being controlled. So that's the connectivity. And then in this controller map section, you can select each knob, each pad, and each pattern button. And if we look down the bottom here, you've got reams of information that you can be assigned to these. So you can have CC modes, you can define which MIDI CC control you're using, you can have ranges. So this is going to be from 0 to 127. So this knob, for example, could only control between 54 and 85 on the MIDI CC range. And then you can define which ports it's going out on, how the knobs are working, absolute or relative. There's so much here you can do here, which we haven't got time to cover in this video, but the options are there. And that's for each individual knob. So you could get lost for days setting this thing up to your heart's desire. And the last thing we're going to look at is device settings. And again, there's a ton of information here. So we can use global, absolute or relative settings. You can set knob control, the acceleration, i.e. how fast this thing is going to respond. Aftertouch, you can set scene modes. There's all sorts of things here. And also the touch strip. Will that send and receive MIDI? What MIDI CC it's going to be using? What MIDI channels certain aspects of the machine are using? The control surface options. Transposition, whether it latches. So you know the way Ableton Live works. If you're in session mode and you switch between scenes, Ableton Live will wait until the next bar before it switches over. You can do the same kind of thing with this, or switch it off. And you can set that all up in the controls here. Let's scroll down a bit. So we've got CV gate options, we've got sync options, how much, what the resolution of the sync options are, tap tempo, projects options. We can set up the metronome here. One thing I'll say about the metronome sends out a metronome tap on MIDI channel 10. Now you just have to make sure that the drum machine you're sending that to, because the metronome isn't internal, it's actually a MIDI metronome. So it's using a drum machine click to give you the metronome sound. So you just have to make sure that that's set up to send information to the right pad. Otherwise you might get a snare back as your metronome sound, which I've had a couple of times. I don't use the metronome, but if you do, you just have to make sure that's set up properly. So we've got options here to define what the transport control does as well. And speaking of the drum map, this is your drum map. As it stands, the custom one is set up to respond and work with most drum machines. I mean, when I hook this up, you'll see it in the first video to my drum brute, the pads acted as the pads do on the drum machine. But you can custom design all these pads to send data out to the drum machine of your choice. It's also got mappings for the Arturia Spark, General MIDI, and you can set up, as I said, you can set up this drum channel as a chromatic sequencer as well, so it can behave more like the other two sequencers. And then right down at the bottom, you've got the option to set up the user scale. So looking at the sequencer itself, when you're in sequencer mode, when you hold down, shift, you can choose for this to operate in certain scales. So it can be chromatic, major, minor, Dorian, Mixolydian. The end one is a user scale. So here, this option here, you can set up individual notes. So each note in a scale can either be set to on or off. And then when you click user scale, that's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to have to use. So that's pretty much an overview. We've gone over this very quickly because I want to start using it. It's much easier to see how this thing works in action. So I will see you in the next video. Cheers.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content. And if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.